Hello everybody. Today we will talk about Australia in brief. Official name: Commonwealth of Australia. Form of government: federal parliamentary democracy, Commonwealth realm. Capital: Canberra. Population: 22,507,617. Official language: English. Money: Australian dollar. Area: 7,692,024 square kilometers. Major mountain ranges: Great Dividing Range, McDonnell Ranges. Major rivers: Murray-Darling, Murrumbidgee, Lachlan. The flag of Australia is a defaced blue ensign, a blue field with the Union Jack in the canton upper high quarter, and a large wide seven-pointed star known as the Commonwealth Star in the lower high quarter. The flag contains a representation of the Southern Cross constellation, made up of 5 white stars, 1 small 5-pointed star and 4 larger 7-pointed stars. There are other official flags representing Australia, its people and core functions of government. Australia, officially called the Commonwealth of Australia, is a country and sovereign state in the Southern Hemisphere, located in Oceania. Its capital city is Canberra, and its largest city is Sydney. Australia is the 6th biggest country in the world by land area, and is part of the Oceanic and Australasian regions. Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea and other islands on the Australian tectonic plate are together called Australasia, which is one of the world's great ecozones. When other Pacific islands are included with Australasia, it is called Oceania. 25 million people live in Australia, and about 80% of them live on the east coast. The country is divided up into 6 states and 2 territories, and more than half of Australia's population lives in and around the cities of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. Australia is known for its mining, its production of wool, and as the world's largest producer of bauxite. Its emblem is a flower called the golden wattle. Geography: Australia's land mass of 7,617,930 square kilometers is on the Indo-Australian plate. The continent of Australia, including the island of Tasmania, was separated from the other continents of the world many millions of years ago. Because of this, many animals and plants live in Australia that do not live anywhere else. These include animals like the kangaroo, the koala, the emu, the kookaburra, sheep, and the platypus. People first arrived in Australia more than 50,000 years ago. These native Australians are called the Australian Aborigines. For the history of Australia, see History of Australia. Most of the Australian colonies, having been settled from Britain, became mostly independent democratic states in the 1850s, and all 6 combined as a federation on the 1st of January 1901. The first Prime Minister of Australia was Edmund Barton in 1901. Australia is a member of the United Nations and the Commonwealth of Nations. It is a parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy with Elizabeth II as Queen of Australia and head of state, and a Governor-General, who is chosen by the Prime Minister to carry out all the duties of the Queen in Australia. Nature: Australia's ecosystem is an unusual one because of its remote location. As a result, there are many animal species that occur here and nowhere else in the world, such as the platypus, kangaroo, echidna, and koala. Australia has 516 national parks to protect its unique plants and animals. One of Australia's most amazing sights rises like an enormous whale's back from a flat red soil desert called the Red Centre. This site is called Uluru, and it is a sacred natural formation at the heart of the country. Rising 1,100 feet (335 meters) tall, it is the largest rock in the world. Australia is home to many of the deadliest species of animals on the planet. There are 36 species of poisonous funnel web spiders in eastern Australia. There are also 20 types of venomous snakes, including the taipan, which attacks without warning and bites repeatedly, killing its victim in minutes. There are several types of rainforests in Australia. Tropical rainforests, mainly found in the northeast, are the richest in plant and animal species. Subtropical rainforests are found near the mid-eastern coast, and broadleaf rainforests grow in the southeast and on the island of Tasmania. Population. Today the population of Australia consists of more than 270 ethnic groups. Nearly a quarter of the people who live in Australia were born in other countries. They come from the United Kingdom and other European countries, but also from China, Vietnam, North Africa, and the Middle East. Australia's warm, sunny climate and abundance of open spaces gives the population a love of the outdoors. The people are also passionate about sports, including swimming, surfing, sailing, tennis, soccer, cricket, rugby, and their own invention, Australian rules football. History. Aboriginal people arrived in Australia about 50,000 years ago. They may have travelled from Asia across land bridges that were exposed when sea levels were lower. The hardy Aborigines have learned to live in the harsh conditions of the outback. Dutch explorers first landed in Australia in 1606, and the British began to settle there in 1788. Many settlers were criminals sent to live in Australia as punishment. For a short time, the newcomers lived peacefully with the Aboriginal people. But soon, fighting broke out over who owned the land. In 1851, gold was discovered in Australia. A rush to find riches brought thousands of new immigrants, and by 1859, 6 separate colonies existed. In 1901, these colonies joined to form a British Commonwealth. Political. Australia's constitution, which can be considered crudely as an amalgam of the constitutional forms of the United Kingdom and the United States, was adopted in 1900 and entered into force in 1901. It established a constitutional monarchy, with the British monarch, represented locally by a Governor-General, the reigning sovereign of Australia. Likewise, Australia adopted the British parliamentary model, with the governments of the Commonwealth of Australia and of the Australian states chosen by the members of the parliaments. Similar to the United States, Australia is a federation, and the duties of the federal government and the division of powers between the Commonwealth and the states are established in a written constitution. Under the Constitution, the federal government has responsibility for defense, foreign policy, immigration, customs and excise, and the post office. Those powers not given to the federal government in the Constitution, the residual powers, are left to the states, which are responsible for justice, education, health, and internal transport. In keeping with federalism, the Constitution can be altered only by majorities in both federal houses of the legislature, followed by a referendum that gains the consent of a majority of all the electors and a majority in at least 4 of the 6 states. Constitutional disputes are resolved by the High Court of Australia. Although the British monarch is Australia's formal head of state, the sovereign's functions are almost entirely formal and decorative and, except when the monarch is in Australia, are exercised by a Governor-General who resides in Canberra and by the state governors. Although formally the Governor-General and the governors are appointed by the monarch, they are invariably recommended by the Australian governments. By convention, the Prime Minister, the leader of the party or coalition of parties victorious in the general election, is the country's head of government. Australia's legislature is bicameral. The House of Representatives, the lower house, comprises 150 members, including 2 each from the Australian Capital Territory and Northern Territory. Members are elected for 3-year terms and are responsible for choosing the government. The Senate consists of 76 members. Each state has 12 senators, and there are 2 senators each from the Australian Capital Territory and Northern Territory. Senators representing the states serve 6-year terms, while territorial senators serve 3-year terms. Government ministers are drawn from both the House and the Senate. Foreign relations of Australia are influenced by its position as a leading trading nation and as a significant donor of humanitarian aid. Australia's foreign policy is guided by a commitment to multilateralism and regionalism, as well as to strong bilateral relations with its allies. Key concerns include free trade, terrorism, refugees, economic cooperation with Asia and stability in the Asia-Pacific. Australia is active in the United Nations and the Commonwealth of Nations. Given its history of starting and supporting important regional and global initiatives, it has been described as a regional middle power par excellence. Australia's imports of major weapons increased 60% between 2005 to 2009 and 2010 to 14, making it the sixth largest importer in the world according to SIPRI. It maintains significant ties with ASEAN and has become steadfastly allied with New Zealand, through long-standing ties dating back to the 1800s. The country also has a long-standing alliance with the United States of America. Over recent decades, Australia has sought to strengthen its relationship with Asian countries, with this becoming the focus of the country's network of diplomatic missions. Military. Australia's armed forces, the Australian Defence Force (ADF), comprise the Royal Australian Navy, RAN, the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force (RAF), in total numbering 81,214 personnel, including 57,982 regulars and 23,232 reservists, as of November 2015. The titular role of Commander-in-Chief is vested in the Governor-General, who appoints a Chief of the Defence Force from one of the armed services on the advice of the government. Day-to-day force operations are under the command of the Chief, while broader administration and the formulation of defence policy is undertaken by the Minister and Department of Defence. In the 2016-17 budget, defence spending comprised 2% of GDP, representing the world's 12th largest defence budget. Australia has been involved in UN and regional peacekeeping, disaster relief and armed conflict, including the 2003 invasion of Iraq. It currently has deployed about 2,241 personnel in varying capacities to 12 international operations in areas including Iraq and Afghanistan. Economy. The economy of Australia is a large mixed market economy, with a GDP of $1.69 trillion as of 2017. In 2018, Australia overtook Switzerland, and became the country with the largest median wealth per adult. Australia's total wealth was $8.9 trillion as of June 2016. In 2016, Australia was the 14th largest national economy by nominal GDP, 20th largest by PPP-adjusted GDP, and was the 25th largest goods exporter and 20th largest goods importer. Australia took the record for the longest run of uninterrupted GDP growth in the developed world with the March 2017 financial quarter, the 103rd quarter, and marked 26 years since the country had a technical recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. The Australian economy is dominated by its service sector, comprising 61.1% of the GDP and employing 79.2% of the labour force in 2016. East Asia, including ASEAN and Northeast Asia, is a top export destination, accounting for about 64% of exports in 2016. Australia has the 8th highest total estimated value of natural resources, valued at $19.9 trillion in 2016. At the height of the mining boom in 2009-10, the total value added of the mining industry was 8.4% of GDP. Despite the recent decline in the mining sector, the Australian economy has remained resilient and stable and has not experienced a recession since July 1991. The Australian Securities Exchange in Sydney is the 16th largest stock exchange in the world in terms of domestic market capitalisation, and has the largest interest rate derivatives market in Asia. Some of Australia's large companies include but are not limited to Wesfarmers, Woolworths, Rio Tinto Group, BHP Billiton, Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, Westpac, ANZ, Macquarie Group, Telstra and Caltex Australia. The currency of Australia and its territories is the Australian dollar, which it shares with several Pacific nation-states. Australia is a member of the APEC, G20, OECD and WTO. The country has also entered into free trade agreements with ASEAN, Canada, Chile, China, South Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, Peru, Japan, Singapore, Thailand and the United States. The ANZ-CERTA agreement with New Zealand has greatly increased integration with the economy of New Zealand, and in 2011 there was a plan to form an Australasian single economic market by 2015.